Hey YouTube, it's Izzy. um, so since my last video, I've had a lot of people talk to me. Actually, a lot of them being anonymous on different websites about my ideas and my opinions and what my views are and whatnot. And most of these people, actually, one of them in particular, who was talking to me on Forum Spring, which is a pretty silly site, but just got me thinking about the ignorance of people. He called me ignorant because I profess and outwardly project my ideas to the public, to you, to YouTube. I don't know how that's ignorant, as he says. First he called me his nemesis, which doesn't make any sense. I don't even know who this person is. This person is anonymous. They're hiding behind the internet, so I can't even talk to who they are. But they seem ridiculously silly. First, they keep making all these brash statements that I am like the only one who supposedly is trying to save religion, or trying to destroy religion or whatnot. And it's silly. Well, I'm not the only one. I'm definitely not the only one. There's probably millions of other channels on YouTube that do the almost same thing that I do. Not the same thing, but many things similar to mine. The Amazing Atheist, Paul's Ego, The Atheist Experience, etc., etc. There's lots of them. I'm not the only one, and I'm not the only one who goes on YouTube and professes my own opinions. This is not something new. The pen is mightier than the sword. The only difference now is that we have YouTube, we have the internet, we have mass media that can present our ideas in a more visually stimulating format than, like, say, a book or an essay or something like that. Which is why I do YouTube, which is why I do this. But it's ridiculously silly to say that I'm the arrogant one. I will accept any opinion that not accept it, sorry. I will listen to any opinion that someone brings across to me, and then from then on we'll move through that debate and talk about it. But I don't deny your opinion just because it's your opinion and just because it's not my opinion. That's fucking silly. That's not what I'm about. I'll accept anything. I had a civil debate on Facebook the other day about religion. I didn't once call him names, nothing like that. I let him push his ideas in, and I pushed my ideas in. When there's not this angry, hostile person who's saying that I'm, ripping apart religion or some shit, which in a sense I kind of am, but I'm not. I'm not meaning to do it in a hostile way. I'm trying to do it in a way that shows people the injustices and basically the contradictory bullshit that's in the Bible and in many other scriptural texts. But yeah, it's just silly. This person coming on here just making fun of me and all kinds of stuff because I am right now, which I'm doing right now again, having my opinions out there. He called me Zorro because I'm fighting for my opinions, which I wasn't saying literally. I'm saying I fight for the individual rights of people. That's what I support. I believe that everyone has their own rights to their own individual ideas. Then, on top of that, I have other ideas about how religion corrupts, how our representational democracy corrupts, which is why I believe in absolute democracy, and I believe that religion should be, in a sense, eliminated. Not let's go kill them all, because that's what other religions do to other religions. There's already enough religions to do that to the other religions. Shit's been going on for thousands of years. Religions fighting each other. But I simply want to show people the ludicrousness, I don't know if that's a word, but of religion. It's just so silly when you look at the things. Like Noah's Ark. Has anyone even read Noah's Ark? Like, at all? If you take the literal interpretation of the Bible, which many people do, and the person I had a debate with Facebook the other day took the literal interpretation, then how do you explain Noah's Ark? There's no evidence anywhere, no real good evidence anywhere, solid evidence that supports a worldwide flood. First of all, you need to have clouds that were similar to the ones on Neptune. You need to have very thick atmospheric swirling clouds all the time to be able to cause a rainstorm. Not like you could say God did it, but then where does the science go? The science that we have been using all the time that shows us how we get our things and how the Earth works. How would that? It doesn't make sense that that would just change at one time because God did it, and then, do you understand that He just puts these miracles in, and then supposedly that's what happened, but it just doesn't make any sense. It goes against all logic that we know. Um, Supposedly the Earth was flooded for almost 200 days, and then He put all the animals back in the places that they went, two by two. So there's actually a part of the I think it was in Matthew that they say that there's actually 7 pairs of unclean animals, and then 2 pairs of clean animals. Whatever though, if it's just 2, He still got 2 of every species on Earth. That's about 20 million animals that He would have needed, because there's about 10 million species on Earth, I think. So we got 2 by 2. He built a ridiculously huge ark to fit all of them in. There was only 4 people did this. They didn't say how long, but still, 4 people building an ark this big. Modern engineering barely has ships that are even close to this size. And then they needed to survive for 200 days. What about animals that are carnivorous? You would have to have had meat there for them to eat. Other antelopes for lions to eat. But then, what do you do with your antelopes? And they're dead. So you need more than antelopes. And then, what about plants? They don't mention anything about taking plants or seeds with them. How could they? If there was no sun, it was raining all the time. How did plants exist? They all flooded underwater. They would have all died. It makes no sense. And then, animals that are evolved specifically on islands, which is I think it's called isolationism, which is what happens to animals if they're on an island too long. They usually get smaller. Dwarfism happens, and they adapt to new features of the island. It's part of evolution. How did that happen? He just put him back there, and then it happened. It doesn't make any sense. And then also the age of these people. Noah supposedly lived to be 850 years old. All of his sons were 700, 800 years old too. What? Humans don't live that long. That's silly. It's silly to even think of. So if you take the literal interpretation, what do you do now? You have this silly story. It's mythology. Does anyone understand that? Religion is just mythology nowadays that people take seriously. It's ridiculous. Well, before I end this video about, a little tirade, I have this idea about the relationship of gods being personal gods to each person, and which is why it's kind of a delusion that people take in. Here, I'll just read it for you. Just another kind of situational thing. Alright. If for a moment you can imagine that rather than the god you assume to rule over the masses of all people, you can assume that each person has their own god. Now, because of this, we have a deep connection with that god, beyond any other relationship or connection we can make in the material reality we all live in. This god does not control the actions of all humans, and so does not know everything that will and can exist, and all of what will happen through time. He is only adept to you, and your existence alone. He tells you the moral code, tells you how to live faith fruitfully and bountifully, and even lets you in on the secrets to gain access to the afterlife. No one knows the God exists except you and you alone. But to you, it's more true than anything else you've ever known. You can't deny his existence to yourself, but it's impossible to prove him to everyone else. After looking at a lot of things on YouTube, I'm going from the essay for a second. After looking at a lot of things on YouTube, I came up with this idea. Lots of debates that I've seen between Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and then many other religious people, pastors, and stuff like that. And this is how they take God and stuff. This is the personal God that they know in their heart that faith can't be ripped from them, that this God exists, and then there's no way you can deny it. Even if you deny every other God, their God exists to them. It is the truest thing to them possible. Alright, back to it. What I've just described is exactly the situation religion asks you to put yourself in, especially in a monotheistic religion. It asks for you to have faith in a delusion of grandeur that encompasses the moral control and limits of your life. You may say to the deepest degree that there is no way to take that God away from you, but to prove it is improbable and impossible. How can you prove something that is only presented only to that one person, and whose relationship with that God is personal? You simply can't. It's an impossible perspective. The only way to know the God is if you are that one person. If you are not, though, then to everyone else, that God does not exist. This is kind of saying what the atheists, how they see it. To each individual person, their idea of God is slightly different than the other person's interpretation of God, as well as slightly different than even the person sitting in the pews right next to you. God is an individualistic perspective that is based on nothing more than the delusions within the constructs of those persons' mind. It's silly to say that you need to seek for this God, for if you can have a personal relationship with him and he created you and is going to be the decider on when you die, don't you think he should present himself to you upon conception, or at least very early on, and continue with you as a guardian of sorts? Why would you have to find him? Why do we, as the humans that are created, have to search out for the Father, the God? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Honestly, though, don't you think about that for a second? Why do we have to search for God? If we're his children, his creations, why do we have to search for him? Shouldn't he already be presenting himself to us? Why is it that when I search into my deepest part of my soul, that I can't find him? Why is that? Alright, to conclude, if each person's idea of God is different, as it is a personal relationship that is unique up and down the scales of conceptualization, then how can he be God? How can God, the supposed father of us all, have different personal relationships with his followers? Even within the followers' own religion, each Christian sees God in a very different way than the other. Even within sects, individuals disagree on many issues. There is no congruent idea of God. If you talk to different Christians, there is no congruent idea of God. They all have different iterations of what they believe he is. If God is really God, then he would show himself to all his creations upon their creation, and would also be the same God throughout time in people's minds. First there was Zeus, Ra, Apollo, and Saturn, then Buddha, Bude, Yahweh, and Jehovah. It's changed generation after generation, century after century, millennia after millennia. Each iteration has thousands of different conceptualizations due to the personalization of the individual. So each person takes that religion, takes that God, and then personally puts them into their own head in their own different way. Each person wants their own God for themselves. They stick to their traditional religion they grew up in, and sometimes convert, and then they mold the idea of God in their head to fit their favorite idea of him. I think it's a way, personally, to get over the fear of death, which many people say that too. It's a way to deal with morality. Mortality. And so they create this imaginary person who supposedly they're going to go meet, and it's going to be all great for them. Anyway, it seems God is simply the different personalized concepts of himself, herself, within the minds of the person. No one person's God is the same, and so that leads us all to this notion that if each person's God is different, then no God can exist at all. Or how can God exist at all at this point? It's a tool used to cope with our sadness, anger, jealousy, and too in many parts to subdue our happiness. As Nietzsche said, God is dead. Yet I digress. God isn't dead. He never existed. Only within the souring, brainwashed complexes of some of humanity's minds did this barbaric travesty of an idea stay alive. We all deny a personal God. It'd be silly to be so arrogant. Yet it describes the personal relationship almost all monotheistic followers describe as their relationship with God. Personal. And that's absurd. No truth can be found in one person's head. And if God can exist, if it's individual to each person, as it ruins the at least contemporary notion of God, who supposedly rules over us all within his domain? Who supposedly rules over all of us within his domain? God never existed. And to hold on to the idea and that claim is as silly as holding on to the claim that unicorns, leprechauns, or Santa exist. It's pure folly, and I no longer will stand for it. I no longer will let people. No, I'm sorry. I will let people. No longer will I stand by and see as people claim that their God exists when each God is different to each person. No truth can be found within an individual person. That's impossible. We have to have many people together concluding on one idea of what that thing is. Yet each follower has a personal relationship with Jesus or God. It doesn't make any sense. There's no truth in that. Anyway, I've gone really long, so peace.